Hello and welcome to PropNex, a property podcast about all things related to the future of real estate. I'm delighted that you've joined me today. My name is Gavin Morgan, your host. If you'd like to know a little bit more about me, please check out www.propnex.com. That's propnx.com. Or drop me a line if you'd like to chat privately on gavinrmorgan@propnex.com. That's GAVINRMORGAN @propnex.com.
Anuj, Puri, welcome to episode 1 of season 4 of PropNex. Thank you very much for joining us on today's podcast.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Very excited to be on your podcast.
And likewise, Anuj, we're delighted to have you, and particularly someone with the illustrious career in real estate that you have had. And maybe to that end, Anuj, if you wouldn't mind just kicking things off with a little bit of an introduction to yourself, your career to date, and what you're focusing on at the moment, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Delighted to mention that. I run a company in India, which is on the property consulting side called as Anarock. We have about 2,300 employees in 14 cities we operate. We largely focus on the residential for sale market and then capital markets and retail leasing. Prior to that, I was the chairman and country head of Jones Lang LaSalle. And prior to that, I ran a property consulting firm called as Chesterton Meghraj. So about 30 years in the Indian real estate, but all on the consulting side, not on the development side.
Thank you, Anuj, and all very successfully, I might add as well. So Anuj, I mean, you've been through some very interesting iterations, not just yourself, but within India, which is one of the global economies that has really come on leaps and bounds and developed at a hugely rapid rate of knots over the past, particularly the last 10 to 15 years. It's also an economy that now finds itself, I think, in a more interesting place than ever in the Asia-Pacific setup, particularly when you look at how we've globalized and how we're potentially now maybe slightly de-globalizing around the world. It seems to me that India is positioned yet again at an advantage in amongst everything that's happening. Could you speak a little bit to that, please? The India market today, and if you think my optimism about the market is misplaced moving forward, or if you agree, and why?
So, Gavin, it's a very interesting question, and I'll probably take a few minutes to explain, where we are on the Indian economy, and more particularly with the Indian real estate. In the past, we've had these start and stop for the Indian economy, and invariably, India has done a self goal. When things are going well, we'll do a self goal, or we're a cricket playing nation, we will call it as a hit wicket, self-defeating, stuff that we've done in the past. I think on this occasion, for the first time in 30 years, that I'm finding that India is genuinely sort of progressing, pushing its way around. You can feel the consumption story in India, really the pulse of that on the streets coming through. There is genuine sort of happiness amongst the people. Growth is visible. And even at an international arena, you can see more respect that the country has been commanding. As I said, in the past, we've been here in these situations like these before, and then we did a self-goal. It doesn't appear that we are sort of in that position of doing a self-goal. And I hope that we don't. So as far as the economy is concerned, doing pretty solid in an environment at a global level, which is really, really, challenging. So it does appear to be a sort of oasis of of growth in a turbulent environment. That doesn't mean that that turbulence cannot impact India. I mean, at the end of the day, as you rightly said, Gavin, we are all coupled economies. Maybe to some extent, less coupled the way Europe and US is for India with the rest of the global markets, but yet we are coupled. As far as the real estate is concerned, from when I started in the mid 90s, it was a wild, wild west. There was really majority of the real estate developers were either underworld guys or politicians, ex-bureaucrats, and very few decent guys would get into this business. With a developer, you shake hands and then you count your fingers, only four left. That's the way that it was. And most of the Bollywood films, the villain was a real estate developer in India. And that's the reputation where it was. We had about 22,000 developers operating in India at that stage in the early 2000s. Fast forwarded by 20 years, we have about 4,000 developers left now of any meaningful size from 22,000. So that's the kind of consolidation that has taken place. There has been a number of sort of legislations, regulations. Media has been, pretty at the real estate developers if they make a mistake. Judiciary has been, pretty tight on the real estate developers. So as a result of which, the market has matured, has become more transparent, more sort of well-governed, more financially disciplined. Are we there where, say Australia or UK or, US is? No, in the transparency index, we're still in sort of the early 20s in the list. If Australia is, number one, and, Canada and US and UK, following that, we're still in the sort of early 20s, but gaining momentum. I think 10 years ago, we were in the 50s. So in the last 10
That's
years...
a lot of progress.
A lot of progress in the transparency index. We moved about 30 notches to the early 20s. And, hopefully as we continue to grow and the market becomes more fertile with foreign private equity, coming in here, there will be more discipline.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's very interesting. Two questions out of that. So access for foreign capital, do you expect that to continue to improve?
Absolutely. Gavin, India is equity starved on the real estate side. So there is a huge opportunity. I mean, Blackstone here, who has done several hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, they consider India as one of their best markets. We've had Brookfield, equally dominant as Blackstone. We have many of the Canadian guys coming in here, CPPIB, Ivanhoe. We have the sovereign funds, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, GIC from Singapore, who have taken big bets on the Indian real estate. So I do feel is that, this market has been benevolent to many of these private equity investors who are largely long-term, and their commitment towards India continues to remain strong. And many of them have now got into the listed play with the REITs. So it does look like that there is going to be a lot of permanence of this capital.
And Anuj, importantly, I think for people listening, it sounds clearly easy for those groups to get capital into and out of India. A correct statement?
It used to be difficult. It's become a lot more easier, Gavin. So I would still not say it is like the Western world, but are people being able to get in and out? Absolutely. Were we able to do that when I was running Jones Lang LaSalle? Absolutely. Is Blackstone able to do that? Absolutely.
And clearly, Anuj, a lot of expertise in country for investors that are looking that can help them understand how to navigate those processes smoothly. That's also correct, yes?
Yes, absolutely correct.
Okay. So, I mean, I think a natural pivot for me, Anuj, then is, what are the hot sectors moving forward, and why? I mean, what would you Where would you recommend placing your bets, particularly as a foreign investor looking at India? And I mean, and please feel free to talk either about asset classes or platform type investments. So, I'd be really keen to hear, really interesting to hear your views on both, please.
Yeah, I think I'll touch on both those, Gavin. So it was the office sector which was really hot, and Gavin, you'll appreciate it. There is a huge amount of back office outsourcing by US corporates into India, and these are large tech parks, that are built and leased, millions and millions of square foot of spaces that are leased. Since 2005, every year, American corporates have taken more space on lease in India than Indian corporates. So, it's a very versatile market, and the American private equity investors in real estate associate and understand this market very well because it's dominated by the Accentures, IBM, Cisco's, Microsofts of the world, who are the lessees in this market. So that asset class did exceptionally well. Blackstone was amongst the first ones who came in, invested, did a very successful REIT. There were about 60 million square feet in that REIT, then followed by Brookfield. They did the second REIT. All these were done sort of just before COVID or during COVID. And then we have had a third REIT that has come up on the office sector. So offices are sort of very well established, largely led by the multinationals. And even in the multinationals, I must admit, it is largely led by the US corporation. The other two sectors which are exciting are the industrial logistics and warehousing. That has come up very rapidly. And as a byproduct of that, I mean, I should not say byproduct, but as an extension of that is the data centers. So these two, we're seeing much of the foreign investment coming into this sector, industrial warehousing logistics. Again, Blackstone, ESR, Logos, GIC, very sort of welcoming to invest in this asset. And I think globally they love this asset class. And so do they in India, and they're investing sort of lots of dollars in this asset class. The trouble, Gavin, in this asset class is that it's low value, and hence, ability to invest huge amount of money in this asset class is really not there because, it's not an expensive, product. Data centers is, but then, the market is not as deep on data centers as yet. Maybe in 5-7 years it will be, but not today. And the third asset class that is doing very well is the retail, which is these malls in India. Consumption story, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, still pretty much intact. Globally, these malls is a bad word.
Interesting. It's interesting, Anuj, you're right. I mean, it's one of the few places that there is a positive narrative around these, but please keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gavin, why there is a positive narrative is one, we don't have social spaces in India, unlike, you've got parks and museums and circuses to go in there. So, what's the best thing on a weekend to do? Go and watch a Bollywood movie, go to the food court, have some food and do some impulse shopping and come back home. Right. So, it is for the social gathering, it's a place that you actually go in. Second is, we are very underpenetrated by organized retail. Unlike the US or Europe, which has far many malls, we have far few malls. So, it is something that, is still pretty much required. And the third is the market is moving from sort of unorganized retailers to organized retailers. And they are wanting spaces in these malls. So there is a fair amount of demand coming in as the consumption story of India, continues to gain more momentum. So that's where we're seeing the retail. I mean, if you look at these malls over the weekends, there's sort of a mild, police, out there with their canes and wanting to disperse the public because that's the kind of rush that wants to get into these malls. I do think is that next month, and that's April, Gavin, we may have the first REIT of retail come up again by Blackstone this time again on in India. So that will be the first retail REIT in India that we will
Okay.
witness. So those are the asset classes: offices, industrial, warehousing, logistics, and retail. Offices used to be the sweetheart for every investor. I think post-COVID has gone down a little bit, but warehousing, industrial, logistics, and retail remain as big champions.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's just such a positive story, Anuj. And I mean, it makes particularly what you say about retail coming off a slightly lower base, yet the market yet to reach critical mass. The dynamics of the market, making retail, I mean, it's a leisure, so much more of a leisure destination as well as a specific shopping destination because of maybe what's not there that you might find in some other places. But just
Yes.
before we move off this, Anuj, I wanted to ask you about the office space. I mean, what I'm seeing in other parts of the world now is post-COVID. Certainly, my view is that hybrid working or some form of hybrid working for every organization, certainly organizations that want to hire and retain top talent, it's here to stay, which does challenge office to a degree in that. I mean, does the office live into the future? I think absolutely yes. And I do think it continues to be a very important part of the fabric of a working person's life. But I do think I do think the sector is being challenged not just by that slight shift in occupational behavior, but the fact that there's generally a little less demand, particularly in the tech sector these days than there was before because of economic conditions. So it's kind of, and then you have this kind of debt and interest rate environment as well, which isn't helping, although hopefully that's a shorter term thing. And India is an interesting market, Anuj, because in a market like New York, where you've got so much pre-war stock that is relatively convertible into things like residential, India is a very modern, new-built market around that space. Do you see that presenting any particular challenges moving forward for the office sector, or do you think demand also recovers there because it's coming off a lower base, and those assets continue to develop in value as we move forward from now?
It's a very interesting debate, Gavin. I mean, it's playing out similar to what you have seen in the US. We had thought that post-COVID, people would start to come back to the office. Fortunately for the front office guys, they've come back. But for the tech guys, they're still not back. And you're absolutely right, Gavin, that I don't think they're going to be back 100% of the time the way it was pre-COVID. I think hybrid is here to stay, whether it is the US or whether it is India. I think on the tech side, hybrid is here to stay. Many corporations did try and force the guys to come back post-COVID, and they have seen resignations happen, and then hence they have gone back again to say, okay, hybrid is acceptable now. That creates a challenge on the demand for the office, because if there is a hybrid that you're going to allow and allow people to work from home some days of the week, then how do you sort of grow the demand for new office spaces? Having said that, in India the demand is still growing, and when you start to peel the onion, then you discover where the demand is growing is largely the US corporations who are outsourcing more and more work to India. And it's just the sheer number of people that they're adding, in India on their workforce, that the demand for office space is increasing. It's not necessarily, Gavin, that everybody started to come back to office, but it's the sheer number of new recruitments that are happening by the US corporations who are outsourcing even more work post-COVID.
And so
Back
you're still seeing that growth today in the market, yes?
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
a fantastic story. Fantastic story.
Last year, Gavin, we had 60 million square feet of gross leasing and 40 million square feet of new office leasing that happened in India. This is like 40 million net new leasing that went in, which was, by the way, second best year that we have seen in India. So you're right on one side, Gavin, that it is a big challenge, this hybrid, and I think it is here to stay. But on the other hand, India is benefiting because of just sheer number of engineers that are getting produced and getting recruited by the multinational firms who are bringing their captive operations into India and recruiting more.
Yeah, well, Anuj, I think, this is a good place to end. I mean, we're sort of, it's a really positive story. I mean, I think probably an expectedly positive story given what's happening in and around India these days anyway. But to hear that you're seeing the demand and growth that you've talked about across those key sectors, even now, when, that really is in most other parts of the world a big challenge, just speaks volumes for the opportunity that lies ahead in India. So, Anuj, if we can leave it here, I'd like to just thank you very much for taking the time to come on PropNext today. And there seems to be plenty there for another conversation in the near future, which, if you don't mind, I'll follow up with you on. Thank you very much, Anuj Puri.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gavin. Always a pleasure speaking with you. And what a delight to be on this show with you, and look forward to our next session.
So that's a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank you very much for tuning in to listen today, and hope to welcome you back to hear some of our future shows. As I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me, look at www.propnext.com, that's propnx.com, or drop me a line on gavinrmorgan@propnext.com. That's GAVINRMORGAN@propnext.com. I hope to hear from you soon, and thank you very much again for tuning in today. All the very best.